The call came in at 11:42 a.m. The dispatcher first heard breathing uneven, strained before a man calmly stated his name. That name had already been entered into official records as deceased. At the same moment, inside a quiet funeral home, mourners were gathering. A closed casket sat at the front of the room, flowers arranged carefully around it. A service was about to begin. The man being honored had already been pronounced dead, transported, documented, and prepared for burial. This was not a prank, a technical error, or a supernatural event. It was a documented incident involving a man who had been legally declared dead, only to reach emergency services while his funeral was underway. The man was not a public figure. Record described him as a middle-aged individual with a history of serious medical issues, including chronic cardiovascular and respiratory problems. On the day of his collapse, emergency responders arrived to find him unresponsive. Resuscitation was attempted and later stopped. A medical professional pronounced him dead, recorded the time of death, and notified his family. From there, the process moved quickly. Once death is declared, procedures follow without pause. The body was transferred to a funeral home. Paperwork was completed, and arrangements were made. No prolonged cardiac or neurological monitoring occurred. At the time, this did not violate protocol. In many jurisdictions, death is determined through rapid clinical assessment rather than extended observation. Medical science acknowledges that death is not always instantaneous. Rare conditions such as severe arrhythmias, cataleptic states, or drug-induced paralysis can mimic death, producing no detectable pulse or breathing while minimal brain activity remains. These cases are uncommon, but they are real. At the funeral home, staff followed standard preparation procedures. At some point during this process, signs of life were detected. The exact sequence of discovery remains unclear due to conflicting witness statements and the absence of continuous video monitoring. What is confirmed is that a 911 call was placed from within the funeral home, traced to a phone line accessible in a preparation area. Contrary to early reports, the call did not originate from inside the casket. The caller identified himself by name, the same name on the death certificate. Dispatchers initially assumed the call was made by a relative or staff member, until the caller provided personal identifying details consistent with the man himself. The call was escalated. Police and emergency medical personnel were dispatched. The funeral service was halted. Attendees were escorted out, and responders encountered a situation few had ever faced. The man who had been declared dead was alive. He was transported back to a hospital and placed under medical supervision. Although dispatch logs confirmed the emergency call, no publicly released audio recording exists. Authorities have not clarified whether the recording was sealed, lost, or never retained beyond standard storage limits. No evidence of deception or fraud was found. A formal review followed. This was not a criminal investigation, but an institutional one. Officials examined whether death had been pronounced too quickly and whether existing protocols were sufficient. The conclusion was unsettling. No individual had violated procedure. The system had operated as designed. There was no evidence of a staged death, financial motive, or conspiracy. No one benefited. The harm, however, was profound. The family experienced severe psychological trauma. Funeral staff were placed in an impossible situation. The man himself became a medical anomaly rather than a person. Records indicate that he did not fully recover. His death ultimately occurred later under hospital supervision, with extended monitoring and confirmation. This time, there was no uncertainty. No charges were filed. Policy recommendations were made, but changes were inconsistent. The story briefly captured public attention before fading away. What remains is an unresolved question. If death can be declared incorrectly and corrected only by chance, how often has it happened without being discovered? Somewhere in emergency dispatch records, a call log still exists. A timestamp, a name, proof that, for a brief moment, the system was certain and wrong.